Y'all know what it is.
Welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is Carl Allen. Carl is a world-class entrepreneur, investor, and corporate dealmaker who's worked on more than 330 transactions worth close to $48 billion. After nearly missing the birth of his second son, he committed there and then to leave the rat race behind and committed to brokering and eventually buying businesses for himself. Today, Carl is considered one of the world's premier experts on buying and financing small business acquisitions. Carl founded Dealmaker Wealth Society, formerly Ninja Acquisitions, because he believes that starting a business from scratch is certifiably batshit crazy. He wanted to use his highly specialized skill set to help others realize that their dream of self-employment didn't have to be a long, hard, up-all-night slog with a 96% failure rate. Today, he helps thousands of entrepreneurs over the world buy existing, profitable small businesses that will immediately put money in their pockets. And best of all, he teaches them how to do all this without using a dime of their own capital. Here to talk about buying and selling small businesses, growing an empire via acquisition, building a legacy of multi-generational wealth, and so much more is our guest, Carl Allen. Hey, Carl, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for making the time to do this. We're thrilled to have you.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So, Carl, why don't you give us a quick breakdown on your career, kind of from college to now, how you got to where you're at?
Okay, so I've had a very interesting journey. I'm 28 years into my deal-making career. So I left college in 1992 and I went to work for a Wall Street investment bank. So I went to work for Bank of America doing mergers and acquisitions. So that's buying and selling businesses on behalf of very large corporates. So I was doing deals for the likes of IBM, GE, Boeing, and also Microsoft. And then I was doing that until, into the early 2000s. And I got a little bit bored with that. So I went to business school in Chicago, did an MBA. And then after a little stint in private equity, I went to work for Hewlett-Packard. So I was one of the directors of acquisitions at HP. So I was flying all over the world doing some pretty monster deals for HP, some in the billions of dollars. And that took me all the way through till February the 1st, 2008. And my life and my world completely changed in the space of about 6 hours. So I'm in Moscow in Russia, and I'm in a boardroom, and I'm closing this deal for HP. And I'm in my final pitch. We're trying to get this deal done. And my phone's ringing all the time. That's my wife. My wife's like ringing me on the phone like every 60 seconds. And I said, sorry, guys, I got to take this call. Something's wrong, because my wife was pregnant. And she calls me and I could hear her. She's in the back of an ambulance. She's being taken to hospital. She's gone into labor 4 weeks earlier than planned, which is why I was traveling. So I literally, I picked up my phone, my wallet and my passport, and I ran out of the building. My luggage is still there. I didn't take my luggage. I've never been back, so I think my luggage is still there somewhere. So I ran out of the building. I hailed a cab. I got to the airport. I flew home. It's like a 3-hour flight. Flew home to the UK. Police escort from the airport to the hospital, and I managed to get there about 5 minutes before my son came out. So my son was born, Josh, and I'm cradling this little guy in my arms. And I just quit. I thought, I can't do this anymore. All this chasing around, making money for other people. I was making a lot of money, but I was a corporate slave. I was chained to a desk or living in airplanes and hotels and boardrooms. So I quit. I called my boss and I quit. And I walked away from $1 million of stock options and bonuses. But I didn't care. I didn't really care. I'd saved really well. So I decided to retire, and I was 37 years of age, and I had this new baby, this new family. I had an elder son from a previous relationship, previous marriage. So I thought, I'm good. And I lasted about 3 weeks. So about 3 weeks into this retirement, I'm freaking out. Like my brain's like, what am I doing? And it was lovely to be with my family, but I'd gone from a million miles an hour to like nothing. And I sat down with my wife, Julia, one night, and I said, honey, what am I going to do? She said, well, your biggest challenge is your biggest strength. You only have one skill set. You're one of the best in the world at buying and selling businesses and doing deals. She said, why don't you become a business broker? So business brokers are agents that buy and sell businesses for smaller businesses, like the $1 to $10 million range. So I thought, okay, so I set myself up as a broker, and I found a deal to sell the transport company, about $5 million in revenues. But instead of brokering a deal, I actually bought it. I figured out a way to buy that business and structure the deal so that I could buy it with other people's money. So I could finance that deal without me having to invest any of my own cash into that deal. So that was my first deal as kind of an entrepreneur. Done tons and tons and tons of them since. I'm still doing deals. I'm buying a really, really cool company right now in the UK. And then about 5 years ago, a lot of my friends and a lot of the people that had seen me do deals were like, dude, you got to teach this stuff. You got to tell us how to do this stuff. And I kind of developed my own proprietary formula for buying businesses based off all of those hard years of doing deals on Wall Street. So on Wall Street, that's the way the pros do deals. They buy businesses using other people's money. And all I'd done was taken that model and kind of refined it to work in small businesses, in small deals that, as you can imagine, are very, very different. So about 5 years ago, I started teaching this stuff I built a company called Ninja Acquisitions, which is a training company. Got to over 5,000 students all over the world doing deals, buying businesses using other people's money. And I sold that company last year to Agora Financial in Baltimore, and I'm now partnering with them as Dealmaker Wealth Society. So we've rebranded it, and we're doing that together, which is awesome. So the two big things in my life are my kind of still doing deals. So I'm a partner in a private equity fund where we're doing all those deals ourselves. So that's great for kind of wealth creation. But my legacy is changing the lives of my thousands of students that I'm taking out of the corporate hell that I was in, and not having them start businesses, which, as you mentioned, is nuts, and getting them into business ownership by leveraging my model and leveraging my experience of doing this.
Okay.
Well, cool. Yeah, no, thanks for all that. That's great background.
That's a lot to unpack too. So coming from, the finance industry to buying a business, especially a shipping business, it's almost like night and day. Coming into that role as, you're now owning this business, you're running it. What kind of things do you have to take into consideration when you buy the business, and B, now it's your responsibility? It's got to be completely different worlds. Just buying it, and now I run 18 semi trucks. How does that work?
Yeah, so let me break that question into two, and I'll start with the last bit. So all the businesses I've ever bought, I've never operated any of them. That's not to say I never really bought businesses in areas that I didn't really know and I didn't really understand. That's one of my golden rules when you're getting into deals. Buy businesses in areas that at least you know something about and you can add some value to. But there's a big difference between an owner-operator or an owner-investor. So I'm more of an owner-investor. When I buy a business, I'm never in there day-to-day, driving that bus. I'm kind of working on the business, not in the business. So I'm working on that business strategically. I'm working on things like culture and leadership and strategy. I'm not the guy in there doing actually all the work. So that's one kind of consideration. So for me, when I buy a business, when I bought the transport business, I knew a little bit about the transport industry because I was helping them initially sell it. But I bought that business and gave 30% of the equity, the ownership of the business, some key people inside of it that were going to run it for me day to day. And that's a model that I have on all of my deals. I'm buying a business at the moment in the UK, and the GM that's going to be running that business for me, I'm giving him 50%, 50, of that business, because he's going to do an absolutely phenomenal job driving that business forward, which means that I don't actually have to go in and do any of the work. I'm just doing the deal and then working on some of that strategic stuff. And then the first part of your question, you talk about, what do you look for when you're buying a business? There's really three things that you need to do. So it's what I call the perfect deal-making triad. The first thing you need to look at when you're doing a deal is definitely buy something in an area that you know and that you understand and you can add value to. So if you're a sales guy for, say, IBM, go buy a small IT company. Don't buy a vineyard or a laundromat or a gas station. Because why would you? Buy something that you know something about, because then you can add a lot more value to it, grow it, and then sell it and make a lot of money. The second thing that you look for in a deal is you ideally want a distressed seller of a good, profitable business, not the other way around. You don't want a good seller of a distressed business. So I never advocate buying businesses that are in trouble. So businesses that are losing money, businesses that have got major issues with them. It's a lot easier to finance a deal to buy a good business that's profitable and has got a lot of assets. So that's point number three. You want a business that's got some financial DNA to allow you to raise capital to buy it. So you want a balance sheet that's got assets inside of it, whether that's real estate or fixed assets or receivables or inventory. And you want a business that's generating a lot of cash flow, because then obviously that will A, help you buy the business, but then B, once you've bought it, the cash flow that's left every month after paying off the financing, that's your money as the business owner, whether you're in there running that business or not. If you're not in there running it, it's almost like passive income. And it's like stacking an executive salary on top of each other every month for all the businesses that you own.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting stuff. And I'm glad you touched on that idea of, should you know something about the business you're buying into? That was actually one of my first questions here was, should we understand the business we're buying, or are we buying it strictly as an investment, something that's totally standalone? So thanks for touching on that.
There's one little caveat, Ryan, to that I'll just touch on very briefly, if I may. So so let's say you're in the IT industry and you're really good at it, and that would make a perfect sector for you to go and own a business, but you're absolutely like sick and tired of that industry. And you're like, I want to get out of this industry like as fast as I can. And let's say you're really passionate about, say, wine, and you want to go buy a vineyard. Now, if you were to try and do that on your own, be crazy if you don't know how, a vineyard business, a wine-making business would work. But you can still do a deal like that. You just got to go and partner with somebody. So go find somebody that really knows and understands that space. You can do the deal, but then have that partner be your general manager, and then you can do that deal together and own that business together. So I'm not saying never go outside of your lane, but if you do, just go and partner with somebody that knows that industry.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes sense. And I suppose based on what you were saying earlier, that partner could maybe be somebody already in the company, right? Like maybe they've already got a operations director, or they've got somebody, that would be a great leader or a great manager that you can go ahead and keep on in exchange for maybe some of that equity.
Yeah, and how would you go about vetting that person? I'm coming in from the outside as an investor. You have someone who's already in the industry working. What are some key things that you would look at when you're analyzing this, not only the purchase and the acquisition, but your potential partnership that you're going into with this person?
Yeah, so obviously you want somebody that's got some real chops in that particular role. If they're inside of the business already, great. If they're not, then obviously you've got to find that person externally on LinkedIn or someplace like that, to come in. And you want somebody that really shares, your vision for being able to grow that business. So for example, the business I'm buying right now in the UK, there is a general manager inside of that business already who's phenomenal. And his biggest frustration is he knows the business has been massively held back by the current owners who, are looking to retire and just don't have that passion anymore to really want to take the business to the next level. This business could be 10 times the size that it is right now. It's a multi-seven-figure business, can be 10x the size very, very quickly if somebody was to kind of take the shackles off it. And these two owners, husband and wife team, they've got the shackles on the business because they just don't have that mindset of wanting to keep growing this business at their stage in life. So that's something that I definitely look for. And I'm a big trust guy, and I have a very good kind of barometer on, I can read people and I can know very, very quickly whether I'm going to trust them or not. Because clearly, if I'm giving them a ton of equity and I'm putting them in to run a business that I've just bought, I want somebody that's really, really super trustworthy with a big heart, very strong morals like myself. So having all those things align, those are the things that you need to look at when you're looking at partners.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned you mentioned earlier looking for sort of, a business that's thriving or doing well, but maybe has sort of a distressed owner. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, in that situation, or maybe if the owner isn't that, distressed necessarily, but what is the incentive to sell a business to an investor like you versus, selling to somebody who might come in and operate the business? So like, why would they choose a deal with you? Is it just a matter of getting themselves out of a deal or getting out of a business, time to retire? Or why would they choose to work with somebody to take over a business just strictly from a financial standpoint, yet, maybe they have to keep operating it or something?
Yeah, so I'm when you look at me as an investor versus just an individual that's going to come in and take the business over, we're technically one and the same. The big difference between somebody like me is, I'm not a competitor of that business, and that's the key differentiation. Because when you look at the typical small business owner that's looking to sell, people that want to sell, they sell for a number of different reasons. It could be they want to retire, they could be sick, they could be sadly dying in some cases, they're burnt out, frustrated, run out of ideas, bored, it doesn't matter. So there comes a time where a business owner decides it's time to sell. And they've typically got two options. They can sell to an individual or somebody like me, or they can go and sell to a competitor. Now, the problem with selling to a competitor is a competitor, they will pay more money typically because they've got a lot more leverage with the business that they've already got. So if you own an engineering company and you go and buy another engineering company, there's a lot of costs that you can take out of that business, of those deals. And that might mean letting employees go. It'll involve changing the brand. It will, in some cases, involve, destroying the culture and the legacy that the owners created in that business. And if you look at a typical small business owner, let's say they've had their business 25 years, they've spent more time in that business than they have with their own family. And in a lot of cases, it's all about psychology. In a lot of cases, it's like they're giving up their children and they want them to go to what I call a safe, trusted pair of hands. Now, not all sellers are like that. About 20% of sellers, they just want the maximum amount of money for their business and they don't care who buys it and what they do with it. That's fine. I'd never do a deal like that. I'm looking for a seller that cares more about the legacy of their business and the safeguarding of their customers, their employees, and their suppliers than they do about getting the maximum amount of cash out of that deal at closing. So that's a massive thing that I look for. So that differentiates me massively against a lot of trade buyers in the business that want to just hoover up smaller companies and then dissolve them overnight and just suck and take in, what they actually want, typically their customer base.
So what are some benefits of, buying an existing business instead of just starting one on your own? I'm sure there's pros and cons to each. Pros, you get, a functioning operating machine that's already going and generating revenue versus starting it from the ground up, buying all the equipment, figuring out how it works, finding your customers, all that stuff. I'm kind of selling it myself right now, but
you are. I don't need to answer that question. You've nailed it. But no, you're absolutely right. One of the things that I've never, I'm a pretty smart guy, but I've never been able to understand this right. Last year, 6.6 million Americans started a brand new business. That's according to the US Department of Labor Statistics, 6.6 million. And 96% of those businesses will fail inside of 10 years. 50% will fail inside of the first 12 months. So the average entrepreneur that starts a business earns less than $25 an hour over that first year. If they're lucky, most entrepreneurs, they don't get paid in that first year. So the pain and the suffering and the trouble and the pressure of starting a business, when you can go and buy an existing business, because if you start a business from scratch, it's what I call the no problem. You've got, you mentioned it, Mike, you've got no customers, no products, no services, no premises, no employees, no cash, no credit, no equipment. And most importantly, no reputation. When you're brand new in an industry, it's so hard to get started and make all those things work. No wonder so many businesses fail. Whereas you can go and buy an existing business that's gone through all that and has survived, and it's got all of those things. It's got cash flow, it's got credit, it's got customers, products, services, everything. Go and buy something that someone else has built. And it's like, you guys, Tesla's massive in the US, right? So Tesla's pretty new in the UK, and I love Teslas, so I've just ordered a Tesla. I wanted a Tesla. So did I go onto eBay and buy all the different components like the wheels and the glass and the battery and all the cables and the tires, and then go on YouTube and figure out how the heck do I plug all this together and make this work? Or did I just go down to the Tesla store, buy one that they've built and finance it using Tesla's own money? That's what I did. And that's exactly the same as buying a business using other people's money versus starting one from scratch and having a 1 in 25 shot of actually making it work.
Okay. So there isn't just a Craigslist for businesses for sale. Like, how do you go about finding a good, option? And then how do you vet it to make sure that you'll qualify to get financing using other people's money?
Yeah. Okay, great. So there's 4 places really to find deals. So the first one is, you mentioned Craigslist.
I was joking when I mentioned Craigslist.
In our industry, they're called business brokers.
Okay.
So there's thousands and thousands of business brokers. There's some pretty huge ones like Transworld and Benchmark, and then you've got sites like bizbuysell.com, empireflippers.com, where there's 50, 60, 80,000 businesses for sale. So you go there and you can search by state, by sector, by size, and depending on what type of business that you want to buy, you can find tons of listings for that. That's not my favorite method. My favorite method is by building relationships. So if you're an owner of a business, and remember I said before, 80% of deals that actually sell don't sell through brokers, they sell through networks. So you need to build a network. So if you're a business owner and you decide to sell a business, there are 5 people that you tell. You tell your spouse, obviously we can't network with them, but then you'll tell your wealth manager, your CPA, your lawyer, and then your bank or anybody that's got financing in your business. So what I teach in my programs, what I mentor my entrepreneurs to do is to build networks with those 4 people, what I call deal intermediaries. And they will send you incredible deal flow based on what you tell them you're looking for, whether it's an engineering company or a construction business or an IT business or a website or whatever it is. So that's those are the four ways to to get deals. And then it's all about building a funnel, building a pipeline. So you generate all these deals, and you might need to look at 10 or 20 deals to find one that's perfect for you, and you're then able to close. So once you've found the deal that you like, remember step 2 of the process is find a motivated seller or a distressed seller of a good business. So that's a big key filter that I look to go through, because every business is for sale, right? It's just a question of how much. If you have $2.5 trillion right now, you can go and buy Apple. There's no business in the world that's not for sale. The key is you can have 2 completely identical businesses, same product, same service, same size, same financials, in the same building in the same town. They could have wildly different valuations depending on the mindset of the seller. One seller could be a young entrepreneur having a lot of fun, really crushing it. He's still going to sell, but he might want 5 or 6 times earnings to even consider a sale. Whereas the other guy, the other seller, who's distressed and highly motivated to get out for whatever reason, he might sell for 2 to 3 times earnings, but you pay him 80% of that money in the future, which is called seller financing. So, if you buy a business, let's say you find a business is worth $1 million, you don't need to pay the whole $1 million at closing. You can pay, in some cases, all of it in the future using deferred payments, which you can use the existing cash flow of the business to be able to do that. It's like the lease to buy model that you see in real estate. It works exactly the same when you're financing a business acquisition.
It's interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So when you're talking about other people's money, and maybe this is kind of a novice question, but when you're talking other people's money, I mean, I guess you're talking about banks. You just mentioned seller financing. I mean, I think sometimes people get caught up on these things. They start to feel funny to people who are maybe new to this kind of business, where they start feeling uncomfortable, like, they're doing something shady or something. So do you mind just sort of elaborating on where this money's coming from? And maybe back to Mike's question earlier about how do we vet a business well enough that one of these other people will provide the money?
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about the sources of finance first. So the first thing is there's primarily 3 ways that you can finance a deal. So let's say you find a business, it's doing $400,000 a year of free cash flow, and the seller's prepared to sell it for a 2.5 times multiple, which is roughly the average multiple for a small business. So let's say that business is worth $1 million. Now, $1 million is going to come from one of 3 places or all 3 places. So the first one is seller financing. So the seller will probably allow a percentage of that $1 million to be paid into the future. So let's say that's half of it. So $500,000 the seller's going to get at closing. The other $500,000 the seller's going to get in the future. Because this business is cranking out $400,000 a year, it's not going to take many years to be able to pay the seller the rest of that money. Okay, so that's seller financing number 1. Then the other $500,000 that you've got to find to pay the seller at closing, that's either going to come from a bank or a financier that's going to give you debt. So the SBA is probably the largest lender of acquisition financing for small businesses in the US. They will lend you actually up to 90% of the purchase price of a business. We'll talk about the criteria in a minute. Or you get the money from equity investors. So these could be angel investors, or for larger deals, these could be institutional venture capital or private equity funds. So they're not putting money in as like a loan, like as debt. They're actually buying equity in your deal. So you'll have to share the ownership of that deal with them. In terms of criteria, that is termed due diligence. So if you find a business and you want to buy it, and you go out, and obviously it's got to be profitable, You want to see a business that's got some assets in there as well. So it's got those kind of keys, those tools. Then what you do is you go and approach all the different financiers, and then if they like it, they will give you a term sheet, and then they will conduct something called due diligence. So they will go through all the numbers and look at the prospects of the business. They'll look at the future forecasts and just make sure that this is a really safe business for you to acquire, but more importantly, it's a deal that's safe for them to put their own money into it.
Okay, so just to sort of reiterate or clarify or make sure that I understand that correctly then. So it is the actual financier who then performs this due diligence. I mean, obviously you're doing some of the upfront work. You're doing the initial legwork. Does this look like an okay deal? But by the time you're ready to present it to a financier, whoever that is, a VC or SBA or whomever, ideally you will have at least narrowed down to what you think is a good deal, and then it will be sort of on them to do some due diligence to make sure, I guess, that the investment.
Yeah, that's right. So obviously you're doing some initial vetting. So is the business profitable? Is it growing? Do you like the business? Is it in a sector that and that you can add value to, and all the different things that we talked about before? And then once you've made an offer on that business and it's been accepted, and you're going through the transactional phase of closing that deal, then there are really three types of due diligence that are done. So all the financial due diligence is typically done by your financier. There's obviously legal due diligence that's done. So depending on what type of business you're buying, whether it's an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, partnership, whatever, there'll be a lawyer will have to do some due diligence just to make sure that everything is okay. There's not been any litigation. Any intellectual property in the business is all tied up properly. And then there'll be some commercial due diligence as well, just making sure that you're buying in a market that's growing. There's no pending major threats to that particular industry. Some of that you can do yourself. Again, if you know that industry, it from your experience, that makes it a lot easier. Or again, if you're buying in a sector that you don't know and you're using a partner, that partner can do that commercial due diligence for you.
So
Okay.
how much does psychology play into the acquisition of a business versus just the numbers? Like some people, they see the shiny red car and they have to have the shiny red car. Is it more a matter of just analyzing the numbers and saying, hey, this is profitable versus I want the red car? Is there kind of a mix of both? Do you have to kind of have the passion to buy the business in the first place, and then if the numbers make sense, you move forward? Or do you just go at it strictly to numbers, crunch the numbers, it makes sense, let's go down this road?
No, so as I mentioned before, you've got to look at the three elements of any deal. So a perfect deal for me, Mike, is going to be very, very different to the perfect deal for you versus the perfect deal for Ryan. So you've got to look at every deal through the three lenses that we talked about. First and foremost, it's got to be a business that's in your lane. It's got to be a business that you know something about and you can do something really positive with. The second thing is, does it have a motivated seller? And is the business profitable? And then the third point, then you get into the numbers. Does it have the financial DNA that's going to allow us to raise financing from other people to allow us to buy it? So that's the psychology from our side. You've then also got the psychology from the seller side. Remember those two sellers that we talked about before. One doesn't really want to sell, but will sell for the right amount of money. The other person, can't wait to get out of the business because psychologically, they just want to check out. They want to go and do something else. And what's interesting is in the small business space where I'm playing now, this $1 to $10 million revenue space, it's 90% psychology and only 10% numbers. When you're buying a multi-billion-dollar business on behalf of HP, which I've done several times, those deals are 90% numbers and only 10% psychology. Psychology doesn't really, come into play. But when you're buying a $3 million engineering company that was founded by somebody in Pennsylvania, in 1974, and he's spent more time in that business since than he spent with his entire family, he's gonna worry a lot more about that business than he is about the money he's going to get. He's going to worry about his employees, his customers, his name above the door. You wouldn't believe how attached sellers get to the name of the business. I bought a business in California a couple of years ago. It was a marketing agency in Burbank, California. And all the seller cared about was the name of the business. She said, if you don't change the name of the business, you don't change the logo, and you don't fire any of the employees, I'll practically give it to you. Just run it in the spirit that I've built it. I don't really care about the money. So we agreed a price, but then I was able to pay all that money in the future using the profits that the business was generating, because I agreed to what she really wanted. And it's the classic in any negotiation. You guys have probably been in negotiations in your career. And there's an amazing book, one of my favorite books of all time. You can probably see it behind me on my bookshelf. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, who was an ex-FBI hostage negotiator. And, one of the big takeaways in that book is, in any negotiation, just understand what the other side really, really wants. It's often not what you think. And when you know what they really want and you can give it to them in a way that benefits you, both sides win.
That's great. Well, hey, so I think that there are probably two different types of investors, and I wanted to maybe explore this idea a little bit. One is maybe sort of the individual who's looking to, I don't know, maybe buy up a portfolio of businesses or something and see if they can generate some sort of passive income streams or something. That's very popular these days. But I wonder too, if you could talk about sort of like growth by acquisition. So for example, maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you have a small business, but maybe, versus going out and seeking new clients and trying to build your business in a traditional way, maybe there's such a thing as a model of acquiring agencies or acquiring businesses. And this just popped in my head when you said a marketing agency, just because I happen to be in that line of work. Yeah. And, and it made me wonder, well, is there such a thing as, I guess, finding organizations like this that are in your industry and sort of, absorbing them or acquiring them as a means to growth versus, sort of a traditional go out and find new clients kind of work.
Absolutely. And, that's all the big guys do. You look at Cisco, you look at Facebook, you look at Apple even, they've all grown by acquisition. Because if you're, whether you're a public company or whether you're a small company, if you've got cash in the bank, or you've got access to other capital, then you can double your business in a day by going and acquiring another company. So let's say you own a marketing agency, and let's say you started that business 5 years ago and you're at $1 million in revenues. It might take you another 2 years to go to $2 million, but you can go out and buy another $1 million agency, plug it into the one you've already got, and you can massively shortcut your growth cycle. And then what also happens is, so if you own a company, you buy another company, there's two amazing things that you can do. So the first thing is you can cross-sell products and services between your existing business and the business that you've just bought. So let's say you had a software company and you go out and you buy an IT services company. You can sell the software to the IT services customers, and then you can sell the IT services to the software customers, just like you do in an affiliate or a JV relationship. But in this case, you own both businesses, you're capturing all the cash flow. And then as you combine those two businesses together, there are lots of costs that you can take out. So it's like a 1 + 1 = 3 on the revenue side, and a 1 + 1 = 5 on the cash flow side, because you might only need one office. So that's a ton of cost that goes out. When you buy the other company, the owner's probably going to leave. So whatever salary they were taking out of the business will go as well. You've got to be a little bit careful though when you're doing a buy and build, when you're acquiring from an existing company, because it's a different pitch. It's a different game of psychology. Because remember, a lot of the business owners that are looking to sell right now, they do want that safe, trusted pair of hands to take the business over. And they'll look at you as a competitor, as somebody that might completely rip their business apart. And forget about the legacy and the culture that they've built. So you've got to be a little bit mindful of that and just kind of weave that in to your conversations. But growing by acquisition is a phenomenal way to grow, any business.
In terms of addressing like the psychological factor, I mean, does it make sense then in a situation like that? Do you acquire as the company or do you acquire as an individual investor? So, for example, with my company, am I purchasing your company as a asset or as a subdivision of this company that I already own? Or am I, just an individual investor who happens to buy marketing agencies, for example?
You can do it both ways. It doesn't matter. If you're leveraging other people's money on the strength of what that's going to do to your existing business, then you're better off doing it from within the business you've already got. Alternatively, you can buy it as a standalone business with you, Ryan, as the individual. So you've got two businesses that are legally detached, but then you can set up all of those kind of arm's length relationships to generate that cross-selling ability. And then plus, you can share resources between those two businesses and kind of optimize what your overhead is, across those two. So you can do it either way. It doesn't really make any difference. I'm not a tax advisor, so I big caveat. I wouldn't want to give you any tax advice, but if you wanted to do that, go talk to your CPA, and they'll advise you that the most tax efficient way, for you to do it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just wondered if maybe that would be a way around that sort of, feeling like a competitor's coming to snipe your business sort of idea.
Yeah.
But I wondered though, if just from again, the standpoint of doing it as a business person or doing it as an individual, I mean, how much of these deals too relies on sort of the investor's creditworthiness, the investor's, cash flow or capital on hand, that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, if you're buying this as a business, are you still going to be on the hook for collateral and things like that, like you would be in a traditional loan? Or is all this due diligence basically established that the loan will pay for itself? So maybe it's a lesser factor.
So it depends on who you use for the financing. So if you're using any traditional bank that's lending against the assets of the business, or you're using an equity investor, then no, your personal credit, your personal collateral is not at risk. However, if you go down the SBA route, so let's say you found a business and you went to the SBA will personally credit check you. You need a credit score of, I think, 690 or above. They will put 90% of the purchase price in as financing. So you've just got to find the other 10%, but they will make you sign a personal guarantee as well. So some people don't like that. In the US, you can't insure personal guarantees, even though I've never heard of an instance ever where the SBA has called in a loan, from the individual investor, because they, the SBA underwrites the money that the bank's put in. So, the bank gets its money back. They don't come after you. And do the federal government chase people for the money? I've never heard of that, but I'm not sure. In the UK, where I'm based right now, we have an extremely established market for personal guarantee insurance. So there's no risk in signing personal guarantees in the UK, because you can take out an insurance policy which is paid for by the business, which means that if, worst case scenario, the business was to fail, and if the lender comes after you for the money, you can just say, there you go, here's my personal guarantee insurance policy, and you're completely risk-free in that deal. In the US, not so much, and I don't think they do it in Canada either. But in some cases, if you find that absolutely phenomenal business, you can add massive value to it, it's gushing cash flow, the SBA is going to kick in all this money. Would you sign a personal guarantee if it's going to allow you to follow your dreams and become a business owner? I've got hundreds of students that have done SBA deals, and are doing phenomenally well. So it all depends on the risk tolerance and the mindset of the investor, I would say.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. Yeah. I think so many people stay out of these kinds of things, these investment things, either because I don't know, maybe they feel like on their personal side, maybe they're sort of maxed out on debt, or maybe they've got some credit card debt, or maybe they don't feel like they make enough money. And so I think there's sort of this traditional understanding of financing or of, of borrowing money, where it's this idea that I have to come to the table with X number of dollars and all this kind of stuff. So it just, gets kind of out of reach. For a lot of people, they look at it and go, okay, well, we can't do this. But I think that's what's so interesting about these, seller financed models and things like this, where basically your financier is looking at this situation and going, well, the business is going to cash flow. And so I think that this is where there's a little bit of, maybe it's just education that's missing, but there's something going on that keeps people out of the game for fear of sort of personal obligations or things like this. When in reality, I mean, the whole point of this particular business, just like somebody investing in a piece of real estate that's, generating income faster than it's costing you money. I think that there's some break there where people aren't really seeing sort of the whole deal, and they're getting caught up in sort of the way their dad borrowed money.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, say, for example, you acquire a business, you go through the process, the SBA funds it, you get that new marketing agency. What do you do in the first, 3 months that you own it? Are there things that you really need to pay attention to? And as you're taking over, there's obviously, regime change. How do you go about doing that? And what are some things that you need to really pay attention to when you acquire a new business?
Yeah. And that's a really good question, actually, Mike. And a lot of that process starts prior to you actually buying it. So when you're going through the kind of closing and, the due diligence has been done, you're already formulating a plan, for what you're going to do. And it's like transition. The presidential debate was on last night. Obviously, we won't talk about that. Kind of embarrassing. But obviously, there's a presidential election in November, and then the new guy doesn't take office until January 20th, I think. And that period of time is transition, where come inauguration day, when they swear the oath of office, they go into the Oval and they have a plan they can execute on day one. And it's exactly the same. So you want to build your kind of like plan in the kind of weeks leading up to the day where you sign the deal, you go into that business, and you can get to work really in like your own Oval Office, if you will. So there's kind of 4 things that you want to do. So the first thing is that there's a lot of kind of boring mandatory administration stuff that you've got to do. So, make sure, change all the passwords on everything, and all the banks, all the bank accounts are transferred, all the credit cards are transferred into, your name, the lease and all that stuff. Most of that typically gets done at the closing table. Sometimes it might be a few days afterwards that's done. So that's the first thing that you do. The second thing then is you've got to do a little bit of kind of change management. So often what happens is, these businesses that I've been talking about, the sellers kind of looking to retire, they're a bit frustrated and burnt out. You'll see that manifested within their business. So you'll have a bunch of employees in that business that, some of them are a little bit frustrated, like the GM in business I'm about to buy that really wants the business to fly. But then you've got another band of employees that have just got used to that slowly kind of boring existence. So when you come in with all your energy and your ideas, and we're going to grow this thing, and we're going to do all this stuff, and it's going to be amazing, most of the team will be like really enthusiastic, and they'll rally around you, and they want to be part of it. Others will be thinking, wow, now I got to work for a living. I can't be checking Facebook 7 hours a day and playing solitaire. I've got to do some real work. So you've got to deal with some of that. And I think it's like taking the temperature of the business. You don't just storm in, all guns blazing, and you've got to have some what I call sensory acuity. You've got to really kind of take the temperature of what's really going on and kind of judge it in that way. It's about really getting to know the people in the business. As I said, I never operate any of my businesses, but I'll always spend at least 2 or 3 days when I've acquired a business, really kind of understanding, what's really going on and kind of the heartbeat and, what are the things that we should be doing. And then I share my plan with them and my strategy and what I'm looking to achieve. So then it's all about financial engineering, because a lot of small businesses that you buy, they and I don't want to go down a big rabbit hole, but They don't tend to manage their working capital very well. They're not very lean and efficient. They tend to be spending a lot more money than they should be. They don't collect cash as quickly as they should. They're paying their suppliers far too quickly. They're not lean and mean. So I have a process to fix that. And then once I've done that, and I've now got working capital coming out of my ears to grow, then I hit the accelerator button once everything's all completely aligned. And it's like getting in a Ferrari, and if you get in a Ferrari and you're not pointed straight down a clean, clear, well-lit highway, there's you're off at an angle and there's cars and distractions and other things, and you hit the pedal straight away, you're going to crash into everything. You want to clean that road up and have a completely straight runway to kind of go down. And then once all that's aligned, and typically takes about 2 to 3 weeks, then you can push the pedal down and really look to go forward. And what's really interesting, virtually every business I've ever bought, and I've bought tons of them, and all the businesses that my students have bought, hundreds and hundreds of them, they all tell me the same thing. Most businesses that you buy, they never do any marketing. It's crazy, it defies logic. When I was on a call 2 days ago on a new deal on the weekend, and I was chatting to the owner, and one of the first questions I asked whenever I speak to the seller is, tell us me about your marketing strategy. How do you win new business? And they say, this is what's great, Carl, about our business. We don't do any marketing. All of our revenue comes from repeat customers and word of mouth referrals. Now that's fantastic for 2 reasons. The first part is, you've got a really solid core business because customers keep coming back and they're referring people that they know. So it must be a good business. But then I know if I buy that business, I can rely on all that solid revenue and cash flow. But then when I put my growth engines into full force, I'm going to be able to grow that business massively over the solid base that you've built. Most baby boomer owned businesses, it's 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day in the US, and a ton of them own small businesses. They don't leverage social media. They're not buying Google ads. They're not doing any of that stuff. They don't have salespeople. They're just sat there waiting for the phone to ring. But they've built really, really cool businesses that are profitable and have grown. But they've not done all that great work of marketing to truly, truly grow the business that they already have. So that's the big opportunity for us as a buyer, is to come in and do all that work that the seller just psychologically hasn't wanted to do.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So, Mike, do you have anything else? Otherwise, we're kind of getting to the end of this thing.
No, I was going to ask you earlier to just grab a book off your shelf behind you and recommend one, but you already did that for us. So,
and I actually just read that Chris Voss book not too long ago.
Let me grab a book for you. So I've got, loads and loads and loads of books here. But can I be really? This is my book.
Oh, okay.
I just pulled it off my bookshelf. I got 3 or 4 copies on here. It's my book, Zero Down Business Buying Secrets. It's like $25 on Amazon. Anybody that wants a copy of this book, I'm going to give them a $5 link.
Nice.
I would happily give this book away. The problem is, when you give something away, no one will read it. If somebody pays even $5, it triggers a switch in someone's brain to try and get value from it. So anybody that's curious about what I do, anybody that wants to understand, that I go through the whole process in this book, anybody that wants to understand what it takes to do deals, because it's not for everybody, and wants to understand, great way to get started, they can have a copy of my book for $5. If they go to trainwithcarl.com/eggs, EGGS, so it's a code I've done specifically for you guys. So trainwithcarl.com/eggs, they can get a copy of my book for $5, and it will teach them a lot in a very short space of time about how to buy a business using other people's money.
Love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Anything else, Carl, as we're wrapping up? Any other things people should know, or places they can go to track you down, learn a little more about what you're doing, and of course, everybody buy the book.
Yeah, so I put out a lot of free training on our YouTube channel. So if they go to Dealmaker Wealth Society, the YouTube channel, I'm always putting stuff out there. I structured an entire deal once in about 15 minutes on a YouTube video, and it got like a gazillion hits and comments because no one's ever done that before. But that's just the way I roll. You know, I wanted to show people how to do this. And then if they go to dealmakerwealthsociety.com, they can sign up for our free e-letter called Confessions of a Dealmaker. So I'm cranking out content 3 or 4 times a week. You know, deals that I've done, places that I've been, you know, nuggets and wisdoms and all the things that I've done over my career. So that's an interesting thing, and it's kind of warts and all. You know, I don't hold back. You know, I do videos in my house. I do stuff with my kids. You know, I'm teaching my kids how to do deals. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, those are the places to come track me down.
Great. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carl. I think this has been really informational. Actually, it's got my brain turning on a bunch of ideas all of a sudden. So I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for showing up.
You're welcome, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See you soon.
Yep, absolutely. And thanks to everybody who's tuned in this week and every week, and we'll see y'all next time.